I think the topic I have in mind today to speak on or speak about is forgiveness. Often, when we think about forgiveness, it's almost always perceived to be an act or even a feeling that, okay, I forgive you. But if we really delve deep into human psyche or even the study of forgiveness by various psychologists and psychoanalysts, we would discover that that's not at all even the correct definition of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not at all about pardoning somebody. For that, we have the word called, okay, I pardon you, I excuse you, you're excused, you're pardoned, and it's okay, you don't have to apologize anymore, I accept your apology, and so on. But the very notion of all human relationships, most notably intimate relationships or close relationships, whether they be with our siblings or parents or children or loved ones or partner, it's based on one fundamental illusion, especially love relationships. And that's not just me thinking about it or saying it, or just merely one person like me sat down and reflected on it. It's what psychoanalysis has established beyond any reasonable doubt over the last couple of 100 years. And that illusion is that there is the other. That there is somebody who will answer our longing, who will make us whole, who will somehow fulfill us, who will somehow not make us feel empty anymore. It is all love relationships are based on that illusion. And because we think there is the other, we almost start to idolize the other. In the sense, when we discover that other who fulfills or who fills what was missing in us, we think the other is complete. It's a very deep point. Think of yourself as a jigsaw puzzle. And one part is missing. And you find somebody who has that part. That person is also a jigsaw puzzle. They also have a missing part or piece or multiple pieces. But because they happen to have the piece that fits perfectly in your puzzle, we think, oh, this person has completed me, therefore this person is a complete person. But the truth is that person was flawed to begin with. Always was. They were a separate individual. It's not that two pieces came together and formed a puzzle. It's that there were two independent puzzles with missing pieces. And somehow one of them had the piece that the other was looking for. So what happens in a relationship like that? We throw ourselves completely at the other person. That I have found the perfect match. That this person is everything I always ever wanted. But each person is battling with their own phobias and fears and shortcomings and flaws. Which is also what makes each person unique and which is what makes this planet beautiful the way it is. a patient of a certain psychoanalyst. I was reading this book called In Praise of Forgiveness by Massimo Recalcati. And it's a short book, in case you wish to read. It's a good one. And he cites an example of a patient who was going to a psychoanalyst. Now, this man was married, the patient, but he also had an ongoing affair. And he said, no matter how hard I try, I cannot choose one over the other. I want to save my marriage, but also I want to keep going. Which is a plight of millions of men, by the way. So it turned out that his own mother had abandoned him at an early age. And he felt very abandoned throughout his life by his mother, because there was physical distance. She abandoned physically as well. And then there was great emotional distance. And as a result, he could never let go of his phobia of abandonment. He could never trust his wife completely that she would be with me forever. She gave some missing pieces of the puzzle, but not completely. And he just couldn't let go, and he spent each day in guilt, in trauma, and nobody was happy in that outcome. So when we are unable to forgive, or when we think somebody else is going to complete us and so on, by default, you're setting yourselves up for failure. So what is forgiveness then? Is it even possible to forgive? We have to go back to this, psychologist called Jacques Lacan. He was a French psychoanalyst who was deeply influenced by the work of Sigmund Freud. And he was also very controversial because he kind of branched out and said, I disagree with a lot of what Freud said. But he said the very notion of forgiveness is embedded in the impossibility of forgiving somebody, actually. You actually think of forgiving somebody when the act is unforgivable. When somebody does something which inherently is unforgivable, that's when the very question of forgiveness arises. Until then, it's okay. You bump into somebody and you say, oh, I'm sorry, forgiven. You embezzle some public funds as a public servant, and the court says, okay, pardon granted. But the very notion of forgiveness is that something has transpired which is actually unforgivable. How do we then forgive that individual? It's impossible to forgive without first adequately, over a prolonged period, going through the trauma of betrayal and abandonment. If somebody does something wrong and they say, oh, please forgive me, even if you want to forgive, you find yourself getting caught up in the same whirlpool over and over again, and you're gasping for breath. You're trying to come out of this. You want to come out, but it's impossible to come out because you have not yet gone through the full trauma that you've been betrayed. And a very interesting point here is the betrayal is not that the person did something that you disapprove of, you see. The action may not that even be a big deal. A part of you may even be okay with that action. So the betrayal is not that the person did something that you think was wrong. That's part of the betrayal. The betrayal is with the self. that I bet everything on an individual who turned out to be flawed individual. That I thought this other was complete. He or she was perfect. There could be no shortcomings in them, there could be no flaw, because if they were not complete, how could they make me feel complete? The fact that I feel amazing, I feel complete, and they filled my cup up, clearly they are the perfect being. So when that betrayal happens, it makes you not only question yourself, it shakes the very foundation of everything that the relationship was based on. Now you are utterly confused. You don't know what to believe anymore. So there is utter confusion, there is trauma, there is betrayal, the trauma of betrayal, and abandonment. That my picture was complete, but obviously this individual's wasn't, and that's why he went for somebody else. Even this is okay to feel this way. And Jacques Lacan then said, we then apply stories to that wound. He said, but words are symbolic. Words can never dress up that wound that one's been inflicted with now. On the other hand, in fact, if anything, he said, now the person is in a real bad shape. Because now they run the risk of writing a story which was never true to begin with. Or not completely true to begin with anyway. In that story, they are the eternal victim, and the other has been solidified as a person who did wrong to them. The other is no longer a flawed individual, a separate individual who had the right to his or her life. The other is no longer a human being who's subject to imperfections and everything else. The other now is sort of a monster. That the summary of my life is, I married this man and he betrayed me. When we solidify that story, then we have also solidified what we call resentment. And forgiveness is impossible in the face of resentment. Healing is impossible in the face of resentment. And I'm not saying everything is forgivable or everything can be forgiven. There was a psychoanalyst called Sándor Ferenczi. I think he was Hungarian. And he deeply admired Freud. In fact, he was analyzed by Freud for about 6 months. He craved for Freud's love and admiration. But he lost Freud's friendship completely because he believed that a psychoanalyst, a therapist, now think of that as a person who's been wounded and a person who's supposed to be the healer. There is somebody who's hurting, who's feeling betrayed and who's feeling let down and who wants to forgive but is unable to forgive. And then there is a person who's saying, I can help you. And that's also the reason why people go from one relationship to another repeatedly, because that one missing piece comes and again that illusion arises that this person is complete maybe. Things will be different. But he had a specific patient. Her name was Elizabeth. I don't remember her full name. Servant, Elizabeth Seven or Servant, something like that. And she actually questioned Sándor. She said, I don't think you can heal me in any way, shape, or form because the questions you're asking me, the way you're analyzing me, is based on the assumption as if you've really got it all figured out and that you are the perfect one. which is in direct contradiction to what you say that the other is never perfect. He said, look, you do have a point. What should we do then? I should also analyze you, she said. An analysis means that you will open up. You will once again be vulnerable. You're once again setting yourself up for potential hurt and betrayal. Vulnerability is you are exposing yourself to somebody and you are saying, okay, you will judge me, but I'm going to put up with it. Even in the most close relationships, that's why people keep secrets. Not because they don't want to share, but because they feel if I share, I will be judged. And to this person, I wish to remain ever loving, ever perfect, ever complete, and I don't want them to think that I'm a flawed individual. So I will hide my shortcomings, I'll hide my vulnerabilities, I'll hide my secrets and desires, and I'll sit on them, and I will present myself as the perfect being to the person I love or the person who loves me back. Because there is that burden of being perfect, being right, because that's why they fell in love with you in the first place. So this woman said, I should also analyze you, to sender Ferenczi, CZI. And he said, look, that's not a bad idea. But Freud yelled at Sander. What the hell are you doing? He said. You're supposed to remain strictly professional and maintain a distance. If you start to talk about your imperfections, she will lose all hope in you that you can ever heal her. Imagine going to a really unhealthy person with an objective mind and asking them, okay, how do I become healthy? Imagine going to somebody who's really unfit and them telling you how to remain fit in your body. You will question, right? Or perhaps a better example would be, let's say you're walking and you get down from your BMW and a beggar comes to you in tattered clothes and says to you, you know what? You could be in Rolls Royce, but you've got it all wrong. You haven't got your strategy right. You're doing it wrong. Listen to me, sit down. I'll tell you how to make your billion into a gazillion or whatever. But you'll say, hang on a minute. Look who's talking. Are you the right person? So when he opened up, Sandor, when he opened up to this woman, he was baffled. He said he was amazed. He was absolutely flabbergasted because every single assertion of hers was absolutely correct about him. His questions, his judgments, his analysis were also stemming from his own shortcomings. So it's absolutely essential for forgiveness, for healing to take place, the understanding. It's absolutely essential to realize, to understand that the other is also wounded. That the other is also flawed. A woman in great distress goes to her therapist and he says, what brings you here? She says, I don't know what to do with my husband. He's not the man I married. Well, madam, I must tell you, he never was. He never was the person you married. You thought you married somebody, you married an image of an individual, but he was never that individual. And then these brilliant minds say that we start telling ourselves a story to protect ourselves. We don't want to be hurt again. So we tell ourselves a story, but that story starts to get solidified, details continue to get added, and that becomes a story of our life, which then deprives us of all the beauty that exists out there in our own lives. Lacan actually goes on to say that when we build that story of grief, of betrayal, Somewhere in that story is hiding our own inability of suppressing our very own desire. We are not being honest with ourselves. This woman was really suffering, and she went to a rabbi, and he was known for his wisdom. And she said, it's been 12 years. I haven't spoken to my sister. We are not on talking terms. What happened? He said. Oh, she really let me down at my wedding, and she kept doing this thing. She made it all about her, blah, 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 blah. Okay, tell me everything, the rabbi says. And she recalled in great detail, very vividly, what all transpired that day, what all she said, and what was the weather like, what was the food like, and everything else. Okay, I've heard it, Rabbi said. Now come back tomorrow. She goes back the next day. Tell me all over it again. She does. Come back next week. Tell me about it again. Now, every time she's telling the details, she's recalling the story, she's starting to see the mockery of it all, the joke of it all. She finds she's adding details that were not there the first time around. And she's glossing over details that seemed so pertinent the first time she spoke or the earlier time she spoke. By the time she had spoken about it 10 times, she realized it was actually nothing important that happened anyway. It was so insignificant, it wouldn't even matter. She said, I can't even recall half the details. But I'm upset about it. But I've made up my mind that, okay, I'm going to now patch up. And that's where something very subtle, beautiful is to be said about forgiveness, you see. Forgiveness does not mean that you've actually accepted what they did. Forgiveness doesn't even mean that you've reconciled what they did. I spoke about forgiveness and reconciliation earlier. It doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't even mean that what they did or what you thought they did to you would no longer bother you. None of those things mean forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean that things will go back to how they were. That suddenly you will say, look, I forgive you. All right, now let's go down and watch a movie and go on a holiday. That's not forgiveness. That's maybe somebody's effort to really make things normal again without actually being healed first. It's like an internal fracture of the bone that's not visible to the outside world, but you are asking yourself to run and it's in your leg or knee or something. They can't see it, but you're hurting. Maybe you don't even feel the pain at times. But you're not healed, you cannot run. But for the sake of the world, or just so that you can feel good again about being normal again, you pretend, okay, look, I can handle this, I can do this, I can handle this, I can do this, I can forgive this man. If you look at Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton the first time around, when she first found out about his affair with Monica Lewinsky, she must have been so distraught. She must have considered the possibility, I should leave this man. But for whatever reason, maybe relationship dynamics, wealth, power, all those things, she didn't. And then many more things started unfolding. All those Epstein files and so on, where that was just a tip of the iceberg. But now it seems she couldn't care less. Because now the illusion of the perfect other is no longer there. It's already broken. It's no longer there. And sometimes some actions never resolve. So when you feel betrayed, You have to be very careful about the story you weave, first of all. Secondly, we have to be mentally prepared that this may never lead to a resolution. That doesn't mean that two people will leave each other. Often, in fact, they don't. People continue to prod along. But sometimes we have to be prepared. Often we have to be prepared that it will never resolve. There was a person called Simon Wiesenthal. He wrote a book called The Sunflower. He was a Jew who was subjected to concentration camps. He was in Lemberg. And there one day, a nurse summoned him to speak to a dying Nazi soldier. She said, "This soldier wants to speak to you." It's to me, okay, what about it? And the soldier said, "Look, I just wanted to seek the forgiveness of a Jew." "Oh, okay, what about?" "I can't even guess what you might have done." He said, "My mates and I, we burned down a house with 300 Jews in it, and when they were jumping out of the windows and leaping out of flames, we shot them dead. And I've never been able to live in peace ever since. Will you forgive me for this act of mine?" So Simon, at that time, said nothing. He said he couldn't say anything. He just left quietly. And he said he prayed fervently. He wished deeply. He wished he had never been subjected to the knowledge of this episode. He said this haunted him for the rest of his life. And then he posed the question to 53 different theologians and religious people and other wise people and psychologists. What would they have done? Would they have forgiven this man in such an instance or not? Simon also met that soldier's mother, who unintentionally in conversations confirmed the story. And she asked him, "How do you know my son?" And he lied, and he just got out of there. So he posed this question to these different people who were supposed to be the masters of their field, deep thinkers and so on. What would they have done? What would you do? If there's a rapist and a murderer, and he's standing in court, and he says to the mother of the daughter, "Look, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I have impeccable record otherwise. This was just a one-off thing. I don't know how I ended up in that situation. I deeply seek your forgiveness." Can the mother actually forgive? If she is goddess, she might say with words, "Okay, I forgive you," but does that mean she will embrace that rapist wholeheartedly and say, "You are my son from this moment on. Come, you don't deserve the gallows. I'll take you home"? Unlikely. But that's what's expected when two loving people go through betrayal or torture or the trauma. They're expected to just be normal and somehow embrace each other wholeheartedly again. But it's impossible until the wound has healed. If you're diabetic, any wound will take much longer to heal. So in some people, wounds will take longer to heal. This man asked his guru. He said, "How would I know that I have forgiven somebody?" Good question, right? He said, "How would I know that I've forgiven somebody?" He said, "You will forget to ask." Imagine a wound, an injury that occurred a while back and now it's healed. You don't recall that injury. You don't recall that wound. It's healed. It's gone away on its own. The scar is, of course, there. Some memory of it is there, but the memory, you put your hand on it, doesn't hurt anymore. So Simon asked 53 different people, what would they have done? And not unsurprisingly, they all disagreed with each other. Some said, I would have given him cyanide right then and there. I would have hastened his death. Some said, oh, I would have put 1,000 cuts, 300 cuts on his body so he would suffer a little longer. Some said it's not even a question worth asking. Of course, you must forgive him. Where was your humanity if you didn't forgive him? So everybody disagreed, not just disagreed, they disagreed with each other radically and violently. And they're talking about forgiveness, by the way. They all got worked up. But the book was called The Sunflower for a reason. What Simon Wiesenthal noticed, that on the graves of German soldiers, I'll rephrase, on the graves of those Nazi soldiers, there was a fresh sunflower offered on every grave. When he visited the cemetery, he noticed there was a sunflower on the grave of every Nazi soldier. But on the graves of his own people, they were unmarked. And he said his greatest fear was not of dying when he was in the concentration camp. His greatest fear was he would end up dead in some unmarked grave where his loved ones would never be able to reach out to him. That his life remain unresolved is a different matter. His death would remain unresolved as well. That the beauty that was accorded to the abusers was not accorded to the people who were actually abused, who were killed, slaughtered, murdered, tortured, raped, and whatnot. He said, I couldn't come around to forgiving that soldier. And we have to accept the fact that sometimes some actions, some situations will remain unresolved. Just how there are some mathematical problems and physics theorems and so that remain unresolved for centuries. Are you then mentally prepared to live with the discomfort of that non-resolution? Because it's discomforting. And only the loving ones, only those who are close to us, those who understand us, those who to whom we've been vulnerable, those are the only ones who can actually hurt us or wound us. Strangers can annoy you. Strangers can be irritating. Strangers can be inconvenient. But strangers cannot betray you. You don't think yourself reflecting on something, I have to forgive this stranger. So we're all incomplete pieces of the puzzle. Something is missing and we are looking for that completion. But the mistake is to somehow think the other person, they may have that piece, but to think that they are a complete piece in themselves. That's where the flaw is. And that unresolution, that non-resolution of something unresolved. So the question then becomes, is it then not possible at all? If forgiveness, the very notion of forgiveness it's based on the act that's unforgivable, what do we do then? Where does that leave us? So Massimo Recalcati, who I spoke about earlier, he says, look, there is a second first time. It's possible. It's like first time all over again. But that, make no mistake, he said, that first time, that second first time is not a return to innocence in any way, shape, or form. It's not the same good old days. You'll be okay. You'll be happy. You will get along. Things will be great, but not the same. It's foolish to think that somehow things will return to how they were, no matter how much time has passed, he said. The only difference this time is that there is no illusion. So it's grounded in truth now. It's not based on illusion. It's like you chanting the Chamakam knowing what it means. That you're asking for dal, roti, and gehu and anaj and lakdi and all that. It's grounded in truth. It's not based on any illusion. You understand that the other person is imperfect, flawed, is a separate individual. They've got their own things going. And that I must not hold them responsible for what I am feeling, because I built my story based on my assumptions about this individual. They are wrong, of course. They have wronged me, of course. But I'm also wrong in making those assumptions. Even if I'm not wrong in making those assumptions, at least I am the one who's paying the price of those assumptions now. And the moment you come out of that illusion, you grow up, you mature. Because if you look at those people who are happy, they're not necessarily those ones who think alike or who do like the same kind of colors or like the same kind of things and what have you. Only two mature people can be happy. If there was something fundamental to happiness in life, I would say it would be emotional maturity. Sometimes that's all it takes. And look at how advanced, or maybe a more appropriate word would be how evolved the sages were. What these guys are talking about is only a couple of 100 years old. But the sages we are talking about a few thousand years ago. Look at this, the summary of all the Vedic wisdom. Something we say at the end of every event. If I forget to say it here, I go back to my cottage and say it there. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamidachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. There is no other, they're saying. You are that. You are complete. There is no missing piece, they're saying. If there is no missing piece, if it's a phantom piece I'm looking for, then clearly I'm setting myself up for great misery and disappointment. You are complete and that is also complete, they are saying. Whole. You are whole and that's also whole. And from whole has emerged whole. And how do you know something is whole? They say, when you take something that's complete and you take something out from it, what comes out is also complete. What is left, Purnameva Vashishyate, what's left is also complete. That's all there is to it. So realizing that completeness, I would say, is the height of spiritual maturity. It's the absolute pinnacle of an evolved consciousness. Where you're so complete, it's not that you're indifferent, but you're just whole. You realize everybody has a role to play in my life, and no man's an island, and I have to be in a society. I have to be part of some community in some way, shape, or form, no matter how much I dislike it or hate it or something. But this is how life is. But that doesn't have to affect my wholeness. The imperfections of the world doesn't have to make me forget about my own perfect path, my own path to completeness. And then forgiveness and everything else sort of becomes secondary. If you're not traumatized, if you're not feeling betrayed, if you are not feeling abandoned, there's nothing to forgive for. There is no story of grief. You have not portrayed yourself as a victim. So forgiveness doesn't mean you will say, now I fully accept you, you're amazing, I love you so deeply now, more than before you betrayed me. Impossible. What you instead say is, look, something happened. It's immaterial now what I think of it. What I have decided, this is not going to be the last chapter in the story of my life. This is not going to be the last word in my narrative. But I'm not going to let this chain shackle me. I'm going to cut this chain of wounding and rewounding, of pain and retribution, of trauma and grief. I have decided you're not going to be a part of it anymore. And then healing starts.